Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The city of Central City buzzed with its usual energy as night fell, its skyline gleaming under the dim light of a cloudy sky. Barry Allen, known to the world as the Flash, stood atop a building, his eyes scanning the streets below. It was supposed to be a normal night, a few petty crimes, maybe some minor accidents he could assist with. But something felt different in the air tonight, something unsettling, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. And then it happened. A gust of wind, unnatural and sharp, swept through the city. Barry's instincts flared, and before he could react, a blur shot past him faster than anything he'd ever encountered. His heart skipped a beat. He leaped into action, chasing the blur down the street, his legs moving at lightning speed. The streets of Central City whizzed by in a kaleidoscope of colors as Barry pushed himself to catch up. But this wasn't like any speedster he'd faced before. The figure ahead of him didn't just run fast. It moved like a shadow, blending into the night, slipping through the corners of Barry's vision as though it was part of the darkness itself. Barry gritted his teeth, pushing harder. His chest burned as he forced himself to keep pace, yet the figure stayed ahead, elusive. No matter how fast Barry went, the gap remained constant. Suddenly, the shadowy figure darted left, vanishing into a narrow alley. Barry followed, barely slowing as he rounded the corner. But when he reached the end, the figure was gone, vanished without a trace. The alley was dark, its walls towering above him, and not even his enhanced senses could pick up where the figure had gone. What the hell was that? Barry whispered to himself, catching his breath. He looked around, scanning the area for any signs. But the figure had melted into the night, like it had never existed. He stood there for a moment, the adrenaline still pumping through his veins. It wasn't just speed. Something about the figure was wrong. The way it moved, the way it blended into the shadows, it was unlike anything he'd seen before. Meanwhile, across the country in Gotham City, Bruce Wayne sat at the Bat computer, his eyes flicking between various reports that had crossed his radar in the last 24 hours. Unusual energy spikes, strange disturbances, and more disturbingly, whispers of a new player in the criminal underground. Normally, such rumors wouldn't bother him. Gotham had no shortage of criminals with bizarre and dangerous capabilities, but these reports were different. Umbra, the name had come up again, spoken in hushed tones by his informants in the darkest corners of Gotham. It wasn't just a criminal syndicate. Umbra was something else entirely. It was secretive, elusive, and more disturbingly, they seemed to be playing with forces far beyond the normal realm of crime. Bruce clicked on one of the reports, pulling up a grainy video feed of a shadowy figure sprinting across a rooftop faster than the camera could keep up with. It wasn't a Gotham rogue. This was something new, something unfamiliar, and it had the precision of a military operation. His gut told him this was only the beginning. His thoughts were interrupted by Alfred Seth's voice, calm and measured as always, sir there. It's been an incident at Wayne Enterprises. Bruce turned sharply. What kind of incident? One involving a certain enhanced individual. It appears our security system has been breached. You may want to take a look at the footage. Bruce moved quickly to another screen, pulling up the security footage from one of his buildings. His eyes narrowed as the footage showed a dark figure phasing through the walls of the building, its body enveloped in a strange, shadowy aura. It moved with unnatural speed, dodging security measures with ease. And then, as it neared the vault containing a prototype device Bruce had been working on, the figure vanished into a cloud of darkness. Bruce had a jaw clenched. Whoever this was, they had come prepared. But it wasn't just the break and that worried him. It was the figure, his ability. He'd just seen enhanced individuals before, but this one was different. This one didn't just possess speed, it controlled shadows, blending into the darkness itself like it was an extension of the night. Bruce stood from his chair, his mind already formulating a plan. Alfred, prepare the Batmobile. I am going to investigate this personally. Barry hadn't stopped thinking about the mysterious speedster since the encounter. It blotted him, a puzzle that needed solving. He had faced other speedsters before, Reverse Flash, Zoom, but this was something else, something darker. As he sat in Star Labs, his mind running through possible explanations, his phone buzzed. It was an encrypted message, one only a few people could send. Barry recognized the source immediately. It was from Batman. The message was simple. Need your help in Gotham. Something big. Barry didn't he hesitate if Bruce was asking for help. It meant things were serious. He suited up and in a matter of seconds was on his way to Gotham. Bruce was waiting for him in the Batcave, standing before a massive display of data and footage. The usual gruff demeanor that Barry had come to associate with Gotham's Dark Knight was even more intense than usual. "I am guessing this is important," Barry said, trying to lighten the mood. Bruce didn't he bite. "I've been tracking a new organization," he said without preamble. "They call themselves Umbra, and they've developed some sort of dark inner technology. One of their agents broke into Wayne Enterprises last night. I think you might have encountered one of them in Central City." Barry's eyebrows shot up. "Dark energy, you think that's what I've been dealing with?" Bruce nodded. "I've analyzed the footage. The figure moves like a speedster, but it's not tapping into the speed force like you or any of the others. This is something different. Their speed seems to be tied to shadows, using them to move faster and avoid detection." Barry's mind raced. "That explains a lot. I tried chasing one of them last night, but they just vanished, like they were part of the darkness." "I believe Umbra is experimenting with dark matter," Bruce continued, his voice steady and cold. "They've been using it to enhance human abilities, creating super soldiers. The speedster you encountered is likely one of them. They call him the Shadow." "The Shadow," Barry repeated, the name unsettling him more than he cared to admit. Bruce turned to face him fully. "We need to find out what Umbra's planning and shut them down before they unleash more of these enhanced individuals. I can handle the tech side, but I need your speed. If the Shadow is as fast as you say, we'll need to outthink him, not just outrun him." Barry nodded, his usual light-hearted demeanor replaced with a seriousness that matched Bruce out. "All right, where do we start?" Bruce tapped a button on the back computer, pulling up a map of Gotham. "Umbra named out of a facility on the outskirts of the city. It's heavily fortified, but if we can get inside, we can find the source of the dark energy they were using and shut it down." The facility loomed in the distance, a sprawling complex surrounded by thick, high-tech security. Barry and Bruce crouched in the shadows, surveying the area. "Looks quiet," Barry whispered. Bruce gave him a sideways glance. "It's never quiet, not when someone is trying to hide something." Barry couldn't argue with that. They both knew Umbra was using the facility to house something big, likely the source of the dark energy that had created the Shadow. Barry was anxious to get in there and move at lightning speed, but Bruce held up a hand, signaling caution. Batman's approach was always meticulous, relying on careful planning and precision, whereas Barry's speed often gave him the confidence to dive headfirst into a situation. This time, though, he followed Bruce's lead. Bruce worked his way into the facility's security system, disabling cameras and unlocking doors with a level of expertise that even Barry admired. They slipped inside without a sound, moving through dark corridors that felt unnervingly empty. As they made their way deeper into the facility, the air seemed to grow heavier. Barry could feel it, an unnatural presence, like the shadows themselves were alive and watching them. His instincts screamed at him to be on guard, but there was no time to hesitate. And then it happened. A sudden rush of air, darker than the night itself, swept through the corridor. Barry barely had time to react before the Shadow appeared, materializing from the darkness like a phantom. The two speedsters locked eyes for a split second before the Shadow shot forward, faster than Barry could follow. The chase was on. Barry's mind raced as he pushed himself to keep up with the Shadow. The two figures moved at impossible speeds through the dimly lit corridors of the facility, weaving through the shadows like phantoms. The Shadow was faster than Barry had anticipated, but there was something else about his movements, something unnatural. He didn't just move through the space. He seemed to slip in and out of it, vanishing into the darkness, only to reappear in another spot as though the shadows themselves were his ally. Barry grit his teeth, pushing harder. He could feel the strain on his body as he pushed the limits of the speed force, the familiar hum of power coursing through his veins. He had never encountered anything like this before, even with all his experience, all his speed. The Shadow was evading him with an ease that unnerved him. Ahead, the Shadow took a sharp turn, disappearing through a wall of darkness that seemed to swallow him whole. Barry skidded to a stop, staring at the swirling mass of shadows before him. It wasn't a normal barrier. This was something darker. Something wrong. He reached out cautiously, his fingers brushing against the edge of the shadowy wall. It felt cold, like the absence of light itself. He didn't have time to think. Behind him, a loud explosion echoed through the facility. Batman. Without hesitation, Barry sped back toward where he had left Bruce, his heart pounding in his chest. When he arrived, he found Bruce already engaged in a fierce battle with several heavily armed guards. The explosion had come from one of Batman's devices, a distraction meant to buy him some time. But the guards weren't the real problem. The real problem was the massive energy generator humming in the center of the room, a dark, ominous machine that pulsed with the same unnatural energy Barry had felt earlier. "Barry," Bruce called, his voice strained as he grappled with one of the guards. "We need to shut this thing down before the shadow recharges." Barry nodded, his mind racing. He knew what Bruce was asking. If they didn't cut off the source of the shadow sun's power, there was no way they could stop him. But how were they supposed to disable something this big? Bruce, ever the strategist, had already anticipated the question. "There's a control panel on the far side of the room. I can access it, but I need you to cover me. The shadow will be back any minute." Barry didn't need to be told twice. He moved into position, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of the shadow. He knew it was only a matter of time before the dark speedster returned, and when he did, Barry had to be ready. The seconds ticked by in agonizing silence. Bruce worked quickly at the control panel, his fingers flying over the keys as he attempted to override the security systems protecting the generator. But every moment that passed felt like an eternity. Barry's nerves were on edge, his entire body coiled like a spring ready to burst into action. And then without warning, the shadow was there. He materialized from the darkness like a living nightmare, his body flickering in and out of existence as he moved toward the generator. Barry didn't hesitate. He launched himself forward, his body blurring with speed as he intercepted the shadow's path. The two speedsters collided in a blur of movement, their bodies twisting and turning as they fought at superhuman speed. The shadow moved with a grace that was both terrifying and mesmerizing, his body slipping through Barry's grasp like smoke. But Barry wasn't just fast. He was smart. He could see the patterns in the shadow's movements, the way he favored the left side, the slight hesitation before each attack. Barry adapted, countering with precision strikes, his fists landing solid blows against his opponent. But the shadow did falter. He absorbed the hits, his body glowing with dark energy, each strike only seeming to fuel his power. Barry realized with a sinking feeling that the shadow was drawing energy from the very shadows around them. The longer the fight went on, the stronger he would become. "Bruce," Barry shouted, his voice strained as he dodged another attack. "How's that coming?" "Almost there," Bruce replied, his tone tight with concentration. "Keep him busy a little longer." Easier said than done, Barry thought grimly as the shadow lunged at him with renewed fury. He barely had time to react, his body twisting out of the way as the shadow's fist grazed his side. The impact sent a shockwave of pain through his ribs, but Barry pushed through it, his mind focused on one thing, buying Bruce enough time to shut down the generator. The fight raged on, each second feeling like an eternity. Barry could feel his energy waning, the strain of the battle taking its toll on his body. But he couldn't give up. Not now, not when they were so close. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Bruce's voice cut through the chaos. "I've got it." Barry didn't need to be told twice. He ducked under the shadow's next attack, using the last of his energy to propel himself toward Bruce. The control panel was now flashing with a series of red lights, a warning that the generator was about to overload. "Get clear," Bruce shouted, already moving toward the exit. Barry grabbed Bruce's arm, using his speed to propel them both out of the facility just as the generator exploded in a blinding flash of light. The force of the blast sent them tumbling through the air, but Barry managed to catch himself before they hit the ground, landing in a crouch with Bruce beside him. For a moment, everything was silent. The facility behind them was a smoking ruin, the generator completely destroyed. Barry's chest heaved with exhaustion, but he couldn't suppress the surge of relief that flooded through him. "We did it," he said, his voice breathless. But Bruce didn't respond. He was staring at the facility, his expression grim. Barry followed his gaze and felt his heart sink. The shadow was still standing. The dark speedster emerged from the smoke, his body flickering with the remnants of the dark energy that had once fueled him. He was weaker now, his movements sluggish, but he was still standing. Barry clenched his fists, readying himself for another round. But before he could act, the shadow did something unexpected. He smiled. It wasn't TA-friendly smile. It was cold, calculating a smile that sent a chill down Barry's spine. And then before either of them could react, the shadow dissolved into the darkness, his body vanishing into the shadows like he had never been there at all. Barry stood frozen, his mind racing. What just happened? Bruce's voice was low, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. He's not gone. He's regrouping. Barry swallowed hard. They had destroyed the generator, but the shadow was still out there somewhere, waiting. And as long as he had access to the shadows, he would always be a threat. We need to find out where he went, Barry said, his voice filled with determination. And we need to stop him for good. Bruce nodded, his mind already working on the next step. Umbra 1T stopped. This was just a test. There's more at play here than we realized. Barry glanced at his friend, sensing the gravity of the situation. The shadow may have escaped, but this wasn't tipped over, not by a long shot. As they stood there in the quiet aftermath of the battle, the two heroes knew that they had only scratched the surface of the conspiracy surrounding Umbra and its dark energy experiments. The real fight was just beginning, and they would face it together.